Hola a todos, yo soy Carol Perelman para Enlace Judío y me da muchísimo gusto estar con ustedes el día de hoy, pero en especial estar aquí en México con la doctora Agar Mor-Shaked, quien es la directora de bioinformática del Hospital Hadassah en Israel, en Jerusalén, pero que trae uno de los proyectos posiblemente más importantes para la comunidad judía de México. Así que vamos a cambiar a inglés, pero Agar, welcome to Mexico. What I was saying is probably this is the most important project for the future of the Jewish community in Mexico. And I would like to welcome you, to thank you for being here, but I think a lot of people have a lot of questions. So first of all, why is this project such an important preventive project for a community that guards itself as without assimilation, endogamic? We cherish so much our traditions, our history, our heritage, but it comes with a very high price. So why is this project that important?
So to do a preconception carrier screening today is a common practice worldwide, because we know that couples, when they meet, they have about 1% chance of having an affected child with a recessive disorders, which means that they are both carriers of a pathogenic variant, which means harmful, disease-causing, in the same gene. In these cases, in the general population, it will be only 1%, and it's enough high to perform a preconception genetic carrier screening. In an endogamous population, isolated and even more in consanguinity families and couples, related couples, we need to offer something that is more extensive because the risks are much higher. So we're talking about at least 16% higher for related couple, but about 3%, which is 3 times higher than just regular couples. If we're talking about a closed community who avoid assimilation, intermarriage, and the risks are pretty high. So for 3% of the couples that intermarriage in the community, they will be at high risk of having an affected child.
So that is very important to take into account. But what happens when an Ashkenaz is not marrying an Ashkenaz, or a Sepharad is not marrying a Sepharad, when we're marrying inter-community? Because as you know, we have in Mexico a lot of communities coming from different parts of the world. So is there really a risk also in marrying from other communities?
So, of course, the risks are lower. It makes sense. The related you are, the higher the risks, and vice versa. But if in the general population, two unrelated, completely unrelated people meet and have children, and they have 1% of having a shared genetic carrier status, 1% is a lot, is 1 out of 100. And this chance can be avoided. It's something that we can minimize. So if we can minimize, it's something that we should offer, at least offer.
And this is not something new. We saw that in Brooklyn a few years ago, and we're seeing this in Israel. How are the prenuptial tests, the genetic compatibility test, being a tool to reduce the incidence of newborns having genetic diseases? What did we learn from Brooklyn, and what can we see in Israel? Is in Israel mandatory, or what is the practice in Israel?
Okay, so it's very important to mention the Brooklyn protocol or project in which they now test all Ashkenazi Jews, and they reduce the numbers to actually 0. So some diseases just vanished from the world. For example, Tay Sachs and cystic fibrosis. These were severe diseases that are very prevalent in the Ashkenazi Jews population, and they were really vanished from our world. The same happens in Israel. There are governmental programs. It's not mandatory, but it's highly recommended, like vaccinations. The government says you need to do it. It's recommended. Of course, we cannot force anyone, but this comes with education. So once the government recommends, the young people are doing these tests because they understand their risks. So in Israel, there is a funded by the governmental program that everyone is doing, and this is a very common program that everyone takes.
So this started in Mexico 3 years ago, after a couple went to Adasa and tried to understand why they had a baby that had a genetic disease. And that's when the project started, with the leadership of very generous people from the Adasa community here in Mexico, Ceci Meta and Olga and Ethel, and all the group that is really working very hard to make this happen for all of us, which is probably going to change, because when we have the tools and we use it properly, then we can prevent disease or at least lower the risk. But what happened in these 3 years? How many couples have gone through this, and should we all do it?
Thank you for the opportunity to share the program that we have been working on for 3 years now. We have about 450 couples already analyzed, and many more are under process right now. But now that we have a lot of individuals that were tested, we know a lot more. We analyze the data as a cohort analysis, so aggregated data, and we can look on the population of healthy young individuals from the community and look on the carrier status of these individuals. And we see very clear that there are pathogenic variants that are prevalent in this community and that are absent from public databases. That means, that shows that some of the variants are unique, and we could only found this using an exome sequencing, which is a very broad approach. So to summarize, we had so far 3% of pathogenic couples that we reported to be positive for shared carrier status, and this was the outcome. So 3% was positive. That was the rate that we are now expecting for many more to come.
So let me pause here 1 minute, Agar, and to understand, from the 20,000 genes that we carry, each of us, in every cell of our body, you in Israel, in Adasa, by examining not only the variants that other population might have as pathogenic, as disease-generating, but looking at the whole genome, to the exome, which is really the part of the genome that really gets our body going. By looking to the whole exome, you found some variants that are unique to the Mexican population?
So indeed, that is the case. We found some variants that are unique for the Syrian Jews here, because the Ashkenazi Jews are more prevalent in the public databases, so we have more information on, but the Syrian Jews were completely absent. We found founder mutations, and by saying founder, we mean that we know that, for example, if 2% of the community is carrying the same variant, then one of the founders has started these mutations years ago, and now it is passed on from generation to generation, and this is a pathogenic variant, but they're only carriers. So if a couple meets and both of them are carriers of the same variant, which is very prevalent, 2% is very prevalent, then indeed they have high risk of having unaffected children.
Okay, so let's say I did the test before having children, which I didn't, obviously. But let's say that I go and I do the test. So I send blood, that is what we need to draw, blood to Israel. And what do you do exactly? And how do you get me my results? What is the information I could draw from that test?
So during the compatibility test, because we are doing a broad approach of exome sequencing, because again, we need to understand about novel variants that are novel for the community, then we have benefits to look on other things. So let's summarize it very clear. We are doing compatibility test for the couples, but also for each individuals, we are able to analyze secondary findings. So I'll take a minute to explain what secondary findings are. When we look on our genomes, some genes are a cause of predisposition to cancer, to cardiomyopathies, and other conditions that could be avoided and prevented. We only report secondary findings that are actionable. We would never report about an information that the patient has nothing to do with. So if there is a specific protocol, a medical protocol, checkups, routine checkups, and tests that the patient can do to save his life, this is the kind of information that is a bonus that you get from the exome sequencing, and we highly encourage the community to do these, to accept these secondary findings. That said, we cannot force anyone to have genetic data that he's not interested in. This is why there is an option to opt out. When you do the compatibility test, you have a consent form, and you can choose not to receive this information. So you have control. You can control which information you will receive. But again, this needs to come with the understanding of what you want to have and what you don't want to have.
So I see this with a triple objective. On one hand, we're learning more about the community. With this, we will be able to know ourselves a little bit more. Second, we will have the chance to prevent the birth of a baby that would have a genetic, most of the time tragic disease. And third, you could have or not the chance to understand or know better if you have higher risks of developing cancer or cardiomyopathies, which you can prevent with the checkups and all of the protocols that we already have. Why is not other populations, or why is the Mexican community doing this and we don't hear about other communities doing this? This is, I think, priceless. And what are the limitations?
So let's start with the first question. Other communities around the world are doing it. Most countries today have governmental programs that are funding specific panels that are well known because the population was already characterized and sequenced. Other populations might not do it because they're not able to fund it. Again, there are costs to these projects that need to be understandable. So this is another limitation to have this test. You asked me about limitation of the tests. Yes. Well, there are a few. When we do exome sequencing, for the couples, the first thing that is very important to understand that we do not look on the child, on the fetus, which means that everything that happens during fertilization in the fetus, we would not be able to detect. We call it de novo, from beginning. For example, Down syndrome. Down syndrome is not inherited from the parents, and as we only test the parents, we do not have the ability to know that these couple would not have a child with a severe disease. So this is very important to know. We are reducing chances. We are not avoiding or preventing at all, everything. There are still limitations. There are other technical limitations for the exome sequencing. Some kind of variations of mutations are undetectable. For example, repeat expansions. And there is one very famous gene, FMR1, that causes Fragile X syndrome. This Fragile X syndrome causes a severe mental retardation. It's quite common in the general population, not here in the community so far, but by what we have already tested. But this is something that the exome test cannot detect. This is a limitation because the exome only can sequence and read the DNA letters, but it cannot detect an expansion of repeat region. So there are more technical limitations, but I guess this is kind of the most important ones.
And you talk, Agar, about actionable findings. So what's next? What if I do the test and you find a genetic incompatibility between me and my husband? What should I do? What is the actionable options that I have?
This is a great question. So I think, first of all, the positive couples receive genetic counseling. When they receive that, they receive all the information and all the outcomes. They understand the disease that is on the line here. They understand the chances of having an affected child, and then they can choose. What we recommend, or the option here, is to do in vitro fertilization with PGD, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. These are a lot of words to say. We can create embryos. We can do the fertilization in the lab, taking the eggs, taking the sperm, do the fertilization, let the fetus grow for a few days, and then take one cell and check it, test it. Then we say, this is a healthy fetus, this is an affected fetus. the healthy fetus can be bring back to the womb and grew for a healthy child for these couples. So this is actionable because they can prevent the birth of affected children.
Well, I think this is a great news because we have a great tool, which is the genetic analysis. We have science, but I have to ask you something very important. And I know in this visit to Mexico, you've been meeting with our Orthodox community, with our rabbis. What do they say about all this? Is this halachic? Can we do this?
It's a very important question. So the first thing that I want to say is that the exome sequencing is very wide, but we have filters. We can close them, we can open them, we can report on a specific timing of request. So that could be before the shidduch, could be after, it could be after marriage. We are flexible, we are here with you to adapt science to the community. Because if we don't go together, hand by hand, and decide what is the best option, then we only do troubles, and this is not the goal of this project. So I think when you talk about halacha, there is very clear sentence to say here, Veshamartem nafshotechem. We can save the lives of these families. We can offer them healthy children. If we don't do that, that's a huge problem, halachic problem. We have the tools now. We have the science to use. We will use it safely. We will use it wisely, but we need to use it.
I was very happy to hear the rabbis talk the other days and to see the leaders of all our communities be together of supporting this project, because I think this will change or could have the potential to change the future of our community, the present and the future of our well-being. And I want to ask you, science changes every day and we learn many new things every single day. What happens when you give a report, when you give results, and 3-4 years later, you find that a variant has another, it could be pathogenic, and at that moment, it was not reported that way? What happens?
So part of the service that we provide at Hadassah Medical Center is being able to revise the data every year and recontact the patients. So what we do, we have a database. We have a structured way of reporting variants. If now we find out that a specific variant is disease-causing, is pathogenic, we explore all the couples, we look for shared carrier of this variant. If we find it, we recontact. For this, we have the local geneticist to follow up, to recontact the patients and inform them with the new information.
Well, that's great news, and it's very important to know that you have a very big team, both in Hadassah and also here in Mexico, who's supporting these couples, because of course, this is something new, but also it's something when we don't know enough, it's very difficult to understand exactly how to manage it. And I think it's very important to clear out that you said something, it's not 100%. It's never 100%. So I think that is very important to, we're reducing risk. It's not eliminating risk. And I want you to just explain why.
So as I said, there are de novo variants. So even if we have, negative compatibility test, which means no shared carrier status was found, still could happen that the fetus will have a genetic disorder that is not inherited from the parents. So this is one thing. Second thing, we are limited in our knowledge as scientists. We don't know everything. We are learning. This is a learning curve. The more we sequence, the more we learn. The higher the volume that we will have from the community, we will have more information and more ability to distinguish between variants of unknown significance and pathogenic variants. So for now, if it's a variant of unknown significance, I may not want to report it, but next day it could be pathogenic and then I would report it. So we are limited. We would not report things that are not known. And this is something that is changing all the time.
Well, it's good to know you're dynamic. This is dynamic. It's not something final. And I think a lot of people are listening to this and are asking themselves, I already have a child. Can I do it? Should I do it? Or this is only for people that are just beginning to start a family or that are before getting married? Who can take the test and who shouldn't take the test?
So this is really a personal decision. We need to understand that if a couple share a variant, a pathogenic variant in the same gene, they have 25% for each child. That means that 1 out of 4 children would be affected. Well, you can have 1 healthy, 2 healthy, 3 healthy, and still have this chance. So the fact that you have healthy children home, this is very, happy. This is a good thing, but it doesn't mean that you're not carrier for shared disease. The timing is very personal. Some couples would do it before the marriage. Some couples would do it after the marriage. Some couples will only learn about this program after they have 1 or 2 children home, and then they will do the test. They should know that if they are a carrier of a shared variant on a gene, then we might get to the position in which we would need to test the children home, because we would want to know if they're affected or not. So yes, it is more sensitive when you have children home. You need to understand, again, a limitation that needs to be very clear to the couples.
And what about privacy?
So as a medical center, Hadassah keeps very high regulation, compliance with high regulation of privacy. The data is completely private, anonymously. We have the key from the DNA number. Each individuals receive a DNA number, and we have the key to unlock the DNA with the names only at Hadassah. This is a very sensitive process in which the data is completely private in our database, which is not publicly available. It's not exposed to anyone besides clinical geneticists at Hadassah.
Well, Agar, I think we learned a lot, and I want to ask you as a final question, what's next? How do you foresee the future? And if there is anything else you would like to share with us.
I see the future very bright here. I just want to say that after my visit here, I see the support of this community, which really is amazing and exceptional, going through a community to one to another. What you have here, what you have built here, is really a one-time chance to do something right, to do something that is wide, that provides the genetic diagnosis of the affected individuals as well. So what we believe that the next thing should be is testing the affected children of the community. This will clarify and make much more understandable decisions that we need to make, meaning if we find an affected child and we diagnose with a specific variant, then we know that the variant is pathogenic. This would be helpful for all couples, for all families. So as a community, we believe that this is the best approach going forward, testing the affected individuals.
Well, I think it's a very promising project. It's incredible that you decided to test the exome, because that's how we learn new information, instead of putting the information we find into closed drawers. And so congratulations for that decision. And I hope you can help many, many couples bring many healthy children and make a better community for us all.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias a todos. Y esto es Enlace Judío, y pues gracias por estar con nosotros.